Welcome to DAExMachiNation. Join us as we explore the mysteries of this world. Cryptids, monsters, macabre tales, and horror stories abound. Could they be true? Are monsters real?
Good evening, folks, and thank you guys for joining us on another edition of DAExMachiNation. In the house tonight is just me and Robby Rip Rains, my brother from South Crackalaki. And, with the cold front going around, I hope you guys have a warm beverage, a warm blanket, and have gathered around the old, whatever you're listening on. Some people listen on their television, some people listen on the laptops, or even off your phone. Whatever you're listening to us with, we're just glad glad to have you here. And I hope you guys are going to enjoy the conversation tonight. Robby, how the hell are you, brother?
Doing good, trying to stay warm.
You're a little cooler than us for once.
Yeah, it was 13 for the first part of the morning. It got to a balmy 19 for the most part of the day, and then
it was down in single digits here yesterday, and today it got up to almost 40.
This weather's weird, dude.
It's nuts. Well, folks, before we get started tonight, I do want to mention that we are going to be talking about the Patterson-Gimlin footage, and no discussion about the Patterson-Gimlin footage would be complete without thanking both Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin for their work in creating this film. We're also going to be crediting Todd Gatewood, who has done some enhancements on this film. We're going to be looking at a few images in particular that Todd has done, and we're also going to thank Robert Maxwell over at Cabin in the Woods here on YouTube. One of his videos was instrumental in this as well. But before we get started on that, I want to mention that what we're going to be using tonight constitutes under fair use. These are images that were enhanced by Todd Gatewood from the Patterson-Gimlin footage, and we will be using these under fair use, with credit to the people that actually own the images: Patterson-Gimlin, Todd Gatewood, Robert Maxwell. All of those are credited here. So again, under fair use, we'll be discussing the Patterson-Gimlin. Hey, we got a super chat right off the bat, out of the gate, from Marcus Antonius. Hey, thank you, man. We really appreciate that. Robby, I know everybody and their dog has seen the Patterson-Gimlin footage. It's something that you and I have talked about a great deal.
Yeah.
But do you remember the first time you saw it?
Probably on In Search Of. I think that was the first time that I ever saw the video, when that old show with Leonard Nimoy. I think that was the very first time.
Sorry, Northwood is cracking me up all right out the gate. Says the new evidence is until recently nobody could figure out why an empty jar of raspberry preserves was found near the footprints, and a very, very clogged up beard trimmer.
Grunt Hilda.
That's going to be pretty funny. Robin Grogan says, "Hey, DA, have you heard anything about anyone seeing cryptids in the California wildfires? Usually every time we've got a big fire like that, it's in the few months following that those stories start coming. They're still fighting those fires, so the people that are seeing them probably haven't even had time to come forward, especially the firefighters and the smoke jumpers. Those guys that are way out there in the back country fighting these fires, the ones that are most likely going to see these things. So I would say watch over the next month or so, especially once they get these fires under control. Be watching over the next month or so to start seeing a lot of these firsthand accounts coming out." Hey, Wes. We got a big crowd already tonight. 135 people already in the group. This is just awesome. Thank you guys for being here tonight. And we're going to jump right into this. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the enhancements that Todd Gatewood did on frames 345, 352, and 364 of the Patterson-Gimlin film. This is the one film that is almost the cryptid world's smoking gun. People have been trying to debunk it since it was released, and this was filmed in the 60s when makeup and suit and effects technology was not great. In fact, the ultimate example from that time period was the Planet of the Apes. And if any of you watched the old original Planet of the Apes, that did not age well. The effects were not great. In fact, when the Patterson-Gimlin footage was debuted, they showed the footage to the guy, the special effects creator for Planet of the Apes, and he said there is no way, absolutely no way, he could duplicate that suit. So I really think that
And
well,
he said,
I've thought for years it wasn't a suit.
well, he said that recently too. He was like, if we'd have had that technology back then, they would have looked better on the movie.
Well, let's talk about one of the biggest claims of it being a hoax, and we all know that came from, well, a guy named Bob Hieronymus. Bob claimed he was the guy in the suit, even though Patterson and Gimlin never claimed they met the guy, never knew him. He claimed he was hired to go out there, and even claimed he could produce the suit. And well, let's just take a look at that, shall we? I've got a side by side comparison of the best Bob Hieronymus could do, and I believe this was done in the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to stand it up next to what he supposedly created back in the 1960s. Now, when you look at these two images, I think it's going to be pretty obvious which one is which. But I just, well, Robbie, what do you think?
Well, right off the bat, the right arm is about a foot shorter.
Yeah.
The shoulders are about a foot lower.
Yeah.
The head's about a foot lower. The legs are probably 2 or 3 inches, if it at least 2 or 3 inches. It's hard to tell because that fake suit kind of folds together, and you can't really see where.
If you look at the position here and the arm position here, look how much longer this arm is.
That's what I'm saying. There's about a 2 foot difference in both of the arms. The
Yeah.
shoulders are 2 foot lower. Look at the traps on the one on the right, how they go all the way up to the ear. There's no traps on the one on the left on the shitty brown suit.
Mm-hmm. And over here, you can see like wrinkles in the material, and this is muscle. You can't duplicate that in a suit with a suit.
So
anyway, go ahead, Robbie. What were you saying?
You can just where the shoulders are set and the neck, the structure of the neck, you can tell where like you pointed out, where the fabric folds up and meets on the suit. And look at his wrist on his left hand. You see where that cuff of material is kind of fluffed up off of his hand. Where's that on the other side, on the real side?
Now this one looks like an operable hand. This looks like latex and bad fur.
Yep. Not to mention the stuff that he built this with in the 90s, where most of it was probably not available
right
in the 60s when this was supposedly built.
I mean, even the guy that, like I said, the guy that did special effects for Planet of the Apes said he didn't have the technology to build this in the 60s, and if he did, it would have cost millions of dollars. Do you really think two broke, out of work cowboys taking horses into the back country could spend $1 million to build a suit to try to hoax people?
And I watched another video today, and the girl that the guy interviewed, she's a professional cosplayer, so she's helped with and built a lot of suits. And she said, okay, let's look at it this way. Say that he got somebody who was basically just into it, just trying to get into it, and was like, okay, I'll just do it for materials. And he didn't have to pay anybody labor, because that's another thing that people kind of, if he paid somebody to do it, that's more money he's got to spend, which is probably going to double what the price of the suit is. But she said, let's just say he got somebody who was, fresh, trying to get into it. She said, how does it look this perfect if it's somebody just trying to get into it? She said, that don't happen. You don't have that from somebody who's trying to get into it, because that's why they're trying to get into it, is they're trying to get themselves better. You don't have somebody that's just this good right out of the gate. And she's the only thing that she could point out. She said there's a little flap of fur underneath it that kind of, she said, that looks like that could be, she said, but that could just be matted hair too that's hanging down. She said it could be fabric, it could be hair. She said, but that's really the only thing that I can point to that to me even looks plausible to make it look like it could be a suit. And there's still another argument for something else. It could be hair. Because that was another thing she brought up, was that a lot of people want to jump to the conclusion that, oh, well, the hair's uneven. That points more towards it being faked. She goes, actually, that points more towards it being biologic, because something being out in the woods and living out there like that, you're going to have spots that get rubbed off. You're going to have hair that gets ripped out. You're going to have hair that gets cut by things that goes over trees, rocks, things like that. So she said when you make a suit, it's all uniformed in spots. Like whatever's on the face, she said they shave that, and then everything else on the back and sides and all that's the same length. So uniformity is actually not a hallmark of it being hoaxed. It's more of a hallmark of it being
a real animal.
Uniform.
Well, even the BBC, which put a lot of money into it, back in 1998, the BBC attempted to recreate the suit and the walk. And the BBC is not like, me and Robby trying to build a suit. BBC's got some money, and this is the best that the BBC could come up with. They don't look anything alike.
That looks like messing with Sasquatch.
It does. I mean, I don't even think it's that good a quality.
No.
I mean, they tried to duplicate the stride. The strides do not look anything alike.
Well, and
the arm positions.
That was another thing.
Way off.
That was another thing that the cosplayer said that she pointed out. She's like, look, when you're in these suits, you have to have what we call a handler, somebody that guides you and so you don't, because you can't see. It's not like you're having your normal vision. You're looking through these little small holes or slits. You can't see. She said, look how this thing is moving. She said, it's not looking down at the ground. It's looking back. She said, unless somebody was out there 100 times practicing this, where they knew the exact path to walk just by muscle memory alone, she said, that's way too natural for somebody in a suit to have done that and not tripped and fall and just look, she said, because the reaction of Gimlin and Patterson when they saw it, she said, that looks way too natural for somebody who had been out there practicing it for 100 times and saying, okay, we got it. Let's take it. Go.
And that's not actually smooth ground. That's broken terrain.
Yeah, that's what she said too, because she said you can see how it kind of walks up the hill. She said, and she went into all this detail about how you would have to make the prosthetics for the feet and all that stuff. And she was like, and I don't understand all the mechanics of it, but basically what she said is there was basically that time there was not the technology to make what they would need to do this kind of stuff. She said it's possible now, but it's still, she don't think it would look as good as that.
Well, Dr. 45-120 had said if those cowboys faked that, then they were in the wrong business. They should have produced the suit and gone to Hollywood.
Yeah. This just goes back to what we've said. It takes more faith to believe that this is a hoax and try to sell the fact that this was hoax. That it does to just say, look, it speaks for itself. It's a real animal. So, I mean,
Roxanne says, DA, there was another study done with an athlete to bionic body put on. They could not duplicate the Patty film. Don't know if the video is still.
Dr. Grover Krantz did that one.
Okay, I may have seen that one, but I think it's been a while.
Yeah, Grover Krantz is the one that he talked about how the shoulder turn and all that stuff. How you see when it turns its chin because it has to turn its whole shoulder. That goes with the traps and all that kind of structure of the body. That they don't sit up like we do and are able to turn their necks like that. They're hunched down, so when they turn, they have to turn their whole body. That whole documentary she's talking about, they went into all that, and they had a professional basketball player, and they got him out there, and I think it was like 30 or 40 times that they had him go through this course, and he never could match it. And this was like an elite level college basketball player at the time, and couldn't do it.
This is a closer look up at the Bob Hieronymus suit. Look at this. You can actually see the wrinkles in the legs where the material is wrinkling. You can see it in the arms. You can see it in the torso. That doesn't look like, I can't pull this up side by side, but I will switch to another image and keep this one in mind, how this looks wrinkly and everything. Now I'm going to switch to frame 345 of the Patterson-Gimlin, and this is one of the ones that Todd Gatewood cleaned up. So I'm going to switch to this image, and just like I said, keep that other image in mind, and now take a look at this.
Where's the wrinkles?
There's no wrinkles. It's all smooth. You can see muscle tone. You can see the bottom of the foot. I wish it was a little bit closer where I could see like toes and stuff. But this is, I mean, you can see like you would see on a gorilla at the zoo. You can see where the hair is parted, not like near the spine. Yeah, this looks well. If you look at the Hieronymus one, because it was a fake fur, it looks different colors under different portions of light. This looks like it's reflecting light like natural hair.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, just look at the traps and how far up the back of the neck they go.
Yeah.
I mean,
this looks like incredible musculature. It doesn't look like that cheap suit that Hieronymus made.
Well, you can. I mean, look at the back of the arm. You can see that striation in the back of the bicep. I mean, I don't understand how people can look at that, and I mean, I guess I can, because like we talked about, people wanting to live with their head in the sand, but I can't look at that and see anything other than just an amazing creature that is real.
I like Ike says, why is there snow stuck to the bottom of the feet? It's not snow. It's the enhancement process has kind of washed out certain colors. But if you look at the undoctored,
it's probably a combination of that and that where they were at is in that dry creek bed. Mm-hmm. So it's probably a combination of the washout of the color and the dust that's on the bottom.
Look at the rocks around it. That kind of grayish color has been kind of saturated out. Mm-hmm. As he was trying to enhance the fur.
If anybody wants to kind of understand, it's a lot of technical stuff, but Todd Gatewood has got a public service announcement up on his YouTube channel. You can go watch it, and he'll kind of explain some of the stuff he does. DA and I both watched it. There's a lot of technical stuff to it. The guy has put a lot of time and effort into this, hasn't he, DA?
Yes, he has.
So, yeah, you're right, Kay. Some people just want to be wrong and want to live their life like that.
Kraken says Patterson was filmed from below angle. Bob's shot camera was looking down. That's an indication that whoever was shooting the image was either at a lower elevation or was much smaller than the thing it was filming on the Patterson-Gimlin film. I think that lends credence to that. I think that's a good indication that they were filming a large animal.
I've heard a lot of different sizes for it, but I think the generally accepted size that Patty was about 6'5". Or
I thought MK was saying 7'2". I thought MK said closer to 7'2".
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I've heard like, I think Dr. Meldrum has said 6'5". I think Dr. Krantz has said 6'5". There's just, like I said, it's anywhere from 6'3" to 7'2". So I think a lot of people just go in the middle and say around 6'5". She's bigger than they were. Yeah,
it's a very broad animal.
Which was another thing that cosplayer brought up, was like finding a female of that size back in those days was probably not something that they were going to do. So that if they'd have found a male and dressed a male up to look like a female Sasquatch, all the padding that they would have had to put in there he would not have been able to move naturally like that was moving. So it's just there was just so much that was, that just, it's kind of like at first I felt like they were going to be like, oh well, this is a suit because this and this and that, but it seemed like everything she was saying was just like how it couldn't have been a suit.
I'm going to bring an image up real quick. And folks, one thing you've got to realize is that for the most part, what most of us have seen of the Patterson-Gimlin is images like this that are 5th and 6th generation copies of the original film. Todd Gatewood worked directly with the original 1st generation. So I want you to take a look at this. This is what we're used to seeing, okay? Now I'm going to bring up the one that Todd enhanced. And well, I'll just let it speak for itself. If any of you guys were on the fence about this one, I think this one's about to blow your mind. You can see the reflections on the eyes. You can see individual eyelashes. You can see the formation of the mouth and the lip, nostril there. This is a much better view of the Patterson-Gimlin Bigfoot's face than we've ever seen before. And the fact that we're seeing glinting off the eyes, you can't duplicate that with a costume. If that was a person in a hood, their eyes would be so far back in there you wouldn't be able to see the eyes.
Yep.
To me, this one, when I first looked at this image, I was completely taken aback. I mean, we're seeing individual hairs, eyelashes, reflection off the eye itself, and what you're seeing there is let me see if I can pull that in. We're seeing an eye that's almost completely dark, very little white. So if this was a person, we would be seeing the whites of the eyes. We wouldn't be seeing a completely dark out eye. So it means their pupil and iris are much bigger than ours. And that's another good indicator that not only they better adapted to seeing in the dark, but may indeed spend a lot of their time underground.
Funny how stuff like that just keeps going to help us with our theory at the DA.
I mean, it's kind of obvious. I mean, here's the shape of the nose. There's the septum right there underneath the nose. You can see the lips. Of course, we've lost some resolution in some spots because that's just the nature of enhancements. You're going to gain some and lose some in others. But we are seeing for the first time individual hairs. I don't think we're ever going to get a better look at the face of the Patterson-Gimlin Patty. And you can't look at this. Well, number one, there's intelligence in those eyes. That is not just some dumb animal. But two, this is so crisp. Look how tall the sagittal crest is.
And that is the exact shape that was looking back in my grandparent or my great grandparents' door. That conical shaped head, the eyes sunken back in the head like that, the flat nose, the protruding lip. That's what I saw.
And I'm going to bring the other one back up. Let you guys look at it for a second. And then I'll bring that one right back up. This is what most of us are used to seeing. And like I said, this is off a 5th or 6th generation copy of the Patterson-Gimlin film. This is what most of the people that try to debunk this film are going off of, 5th and 6th generation copies. They look at this and go, oh, well, look how grainy it is, blah, blah, blah. This is obviously a guy in a suit because there's no detail. But, they have never seen an image this cleaned up. And when we take a look at this one, when we bring this one right back up, it's night and day. And the thing that just absolutely floors me the most about this is we're seeing individual hairs, eyelashes, and eyes. If you're building a suit for even cosplayers, do you really think they're going to go to the added detail of adding eyelashes?
Yeah, DA, like KC's pointing out, and Jesus actually said that when he was talking to us. Remember that spot right there on the lip? He thought was a scar. Right,
it looks like it could be. Yeah, it very well looks like it could be a scar.
So you're going to go to the trouble of doing stuff like that?
No.
I mean, if that's a suit, that's a person with hair glued onto them. That's not a mask. And I don't think that's a person with hair glued on them.
I don't either.
But
To me, it's just absolutely astounding the level of detail we're just now getting a look at.
yeah, Ryan, that was cleaned up from the original film strip.
Dr. 45 says, note the thickness of the individual hairs. Yeah, that's not like human hair. That is some thick hair. Casey says that wasn't even invented in the 60s. I don't think. I agree. I don't think so either.
But even if it was, are two, like you said, are two broke cowboys going to sit out there and glue all these individual hairs on somebody?
Yeah, the individual eyelashes. Again, I'm just absolutely astounded.
It falls into
at
the
level
same
of detail in
category.
this.
Same category we talked about of how hard is it, or how hard would it be to keep something like this a hoax for this long? How much effort has to go into it versus it's just a real animal. Just believe. That's all you got to do.
Casey says, definitely not try to make her mad. I'll hold the door and pay for the check. Dan Wyrick says the dark circular spot above the eyes looks like an ear hole. It does kind of. Here, let me bring that back up, and we'll look at that image yet again. I can't get over. I can't get enough of staring at this one. I see what they're talking about right here. I don't know if that's an ear hole or if darker hair, but it may be where part of the ear was located. I don't know. But we are seeing, darker hair up here and over here. So maybe it was just the way the light was hitting the hair, or it could be part of the ear. I mean,
Yeah, it could be where the ear is.
I mean, if you're looking straight out from the eye, that's right about the area where your ear is at. You go straight out from your eye, you go straight out to your ear. So, I'm sure on primates it's a little different, but
it would make sense.
Not much.
It would make sense for it to be a touch higher than it is on us, because it is a touch higher there. But it would make sense for it to kind of be, because if they're the kind, like we've heard people talk about them doing constantly, doing the tree peeking and stuff like that, it would make sense for their ears to be like that for when they turn their head, try to focus on something.
Roxanne says it looks like there's worry in those eyes. I'm glad you pointed that out, because I've thought for a long time, we've seen animals do this in the wild, and we don't need to look much farther than to our own animal kingdom to get answers to some of these things. It's like Robby has said before. She very deliberately walked across an opening. She didn't go straight for the woods. She walked across an opening and kept their attention on her. I've often thought, and I've even mentioned this to MK, that I think she was trying to draw them away from where she'd hidden her young. I'd say that's why she's got that worried look.
I'd say that's probably
the eyelashes are just intense.
I'd say that's probably why she kept looking too.
If you were going to go to the trouble of adding hair, especially if you're adding artificial hair, would you have gone to the trouble of adding so many different lengths of hair?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Are these two broke cowboys going to be out there gluing hair on somebody's face?
No, absolutely not. I guarantee you, two cowboys that had to rent a camera to go film this, they didn't have the money to build this suit, and it ain't a suit. I mean, look at the sagittal crest. Michelle Richardson says, hello from everyone from the frozen tundra of Lower Alabama. Dee's, yeah, I do believe that's a look of concern on her face. I've often believed from watching that video that she was deliberately trying to keep their attention on her. I think that she had a young one, or if not an infant, hidden nearby. Probably because they surprised her. It was probably right there in those bushes behind her, and she walked away deliberately to draw them away from where the child was. Now that's just my opinion. I mean, I got nothing to base that on other than just my feeling.
Well, and we've speculated plenty of times before. They were on horseback, and so they probably had their smell kind of mixed in with that. They probably surprised her.
Mm-hmm.
She saw them. She was like, maternal instinct. Got to lead them away because I don't know what these things are going to do to my kid. I'm going to lead them away. Because if she'd just been trying to get away, why does she keep looking back over her shoulder? She wanted to make sure that they were still watching her and not going over
and I guarantee you, she's capable of moving a lot faster than she did.
Oh yeah.
Well, the ones the shadows we saw on Combs Ferry, they were moving way faster than that, and they didn't want to be seen. They were going from trees to trees, and we were just getting glimpses of them. Conway Carroll says, look at just above the ears. It's not like any suit. Exactly. Northwood says, how many animals would lead a predator away from their young? Birds do it. Birds do it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
If they got a snake coming near their nest, they'll try to lead the snake away from their eggs. Squirrels will do it. Rabbits will do it. There are lots of animals that will attempt to lure predators away from their children, and except for stuff like buffalo will just run really fast and hope that the predators, satisfy themselves with the young, and they'll just have more later.
Well, the Cape buffalo won't. Our regular
That's
buffalo
true.
will. Cape buffalo.
American bison will. Cape buffalo will come after you.
Yeah, they'll circle around.
Protect it. Shadow Gypsy says she may have been a young mother. She doesn't look very old. I agree. She just doesn't strike me as being an old. And granted, we don't have a whole lot to base that on, but it just doesn't look like an elderly subject. It looks like she was in the prime of her life. Yeah, because if you watch that Patterson-Gimlin footage, she does not get in any hurry. When she realizes they've seen her, she crosses that entire clearing, heading for the trees on the opposite side of the clearing. And keeps looking back to make sure they're watching her, and she goes all the way across that clearing and into the trees on the far side. I firmly believe she was trying to lure them away from something. Dr. 45 says, killdeer will act like it has a broken wing while drawing you away from its nest.
Mm-hmm. I've seen that plenty of times on shows.
Yeah, Kevin Bode said, I heard a thought that there was 3 of them, a male, Patty, and a young one, and the male and the young were shot, and she was going from the male to the hurt young one. I've heard people say that, but I have yet to see a single piece of actual evidence to show that there were others present and shot. Because you would think after all this time, at least one frame would have come up of somebody carrying away a suspected Bigfoot body. But from what I can tell, Patterson and Gimlin were there by themselves, and the way those horses were reacting, they didn't throw a body on the back of one of those horses and carry it out. Those horses were having none of it.
And if she was going to aid her young, she still was moving awful slow if she was trying to get to an injured young one. I just think body language.
Well, I think if they'd already shot one, I don't think she'd have been moving so slow.
Yeah.
I think she'd have been, beating feet for the hills to get out of there. Chris Burkhart says, we have no great apes in the U.S. Hair might cover the ears to protect from cold. Yeah. Well, just because it's a primate doesn't necessarily make it a great ape. I mean, humans technically are primates. It could be a higher order primate somewhere along the family line with us, because we diverged from most great apes, thousands upon thousands of years back in our evolution. But some of these things I think are much closer to us than they are to actual primates. But that doesn't mean they're not a primate, but much more than what we would come to believe is like mountain gorillas or chimpanzees or anything like that. I think they're much closer to us because of so many stories of Native Americans talking about these things carrying off people. And there's even a few stories of women wandering back into camp with child.
Well, but and all that may be true, but just look at how different. If you talk about great apes, look how different gorillas, chimps, and orangutans are from each other. They're all great apes, but how vastly different are
Very
they
different.
from each other? How different are all different types of monkeys from each other? So just because they may or may not be a great ape, but even if they are a great ape, if they've got one adaptation that is different from another great ape, I mean that's just an adaptation for where they live. I mean, I would assume that a Yeti would probably have a different adaptation than a Bigfoot that lives over here
Oh,
in
like the
Florida.
skunk ape versus ones in Alaska. They're described very differently. Jeff Yarrington's got a great point. Bob Gimlin would have said something by now. And if you guys notice, up until the time Roger died and all the time that Bob's talked about this, their stories have not changed.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I think at some point, if there had been a killing of Bigfoot there, Bob would have slipped and said something to somebody. But his story has never changed. And in law enforcement, that's where we start putting credibility on stories. If a person tells you the same story consistently, then because a lot of times they'll think of a new detail they want to add to the story, or they'll want to embellish it a different way if they're just creating a story. But when that story does not change, that to me that's a big indicator that he's telling the truth. And I'm firmly agreeing with Jeff. I think if there had been creatures killed at that site, Gimlin would have said something about it by now.
Yeah, I think there's.
Robert D says they may not have been in on the killings. Maybe not, but he still would have said something. Even if he'd have seen blood or people carrying off bodies.
And if they were that close to it, they would have, and something would have been shot. They would have known,
Right.
they would have heard shots going off. So, there's
Miss
just.
Lene, thank you so much.
Thanks, Miss Lene.
Yeah, I honestly, I can't, I'm not going to dispute anybody that says that, they believe that's what happened. I'm not going to argue with you. I just, for my purposes, I don't think that that's the way it happened, because things don't add up for me for that to have been true. Gimlin and Patterson would have come out of there with more than footprints and video. They'd have got a blood sample. They'd have done something if somebody had killed one of those things. And if there had been professional hunters there, how come we never even get a glimpse of one in the background? Or because there was other parts of that video that were never released, that have been shown at conventions, and not one other horse or anyone else is ever caught in the background. It's always just Patterson and Gimlin, and they wave that camera around a bunch. Kay Bauer says the camera work doesn't indicate shots fired from an unknown source either. Yeah, they're not. They're more excited that they're trying to get footage of this thing. They're not reacting to anybody opening fire. They're not trying to duck for cover. They are just absolutely freaking out that they're seeing this thing out in the open. I have talked with MK, and like I have Robert, I have talked to MK about it. And like I said, if that's what he thinks, that is all well and good. I just don't believe it. That's just me. And that's one of the things about this field is we can agree to disagree.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to agree on every detail. I agree with MK on a lot of the analyzation that he's done of the Patterson-Gimlin footage over the years. Just absolutely, right on there on board with him. But I would think that if there had been other creatures killed there that day, something would have come forward, or Gimlin's story would have changed, or so at some point he might have let it slip. Or one of the other hunters might have come forward and said, "Yeah, I was one of the hunters that killed a Bigfoot there." Nobody else has ever came forward. All we've got is just theory that it happened. And honestly, I don't think the evidence supports the theory. And that's just my opinion. Chris Burkhart says there's more holes in the JFK filming than this. You ain't wrong. How about we take a look at frame 364. And this is Todd Gatewood's enhancements, and these were enhanced for Robert Maxwell's channel Cabin in the Woods. So credit goes to those guys, but we are looking at these under fair use. Look at the level of detail in this. I mean, right down here for one, we've got a calf muscle. We've got thigh muscles right here. You can see the flexion of the muscle in the forearm here and here. This is just, for this to have been a suit, it had to have been the greatest suit ever built.
Now, see that little right there where your mouse was, just on that leg? See that little tuft hanging up just a little bit and down on the back of the thigh? No, on the back of it. Right there. That's the little piece that was hanging down that she said could have possibly been cloth, but she said it also could be matted hair hanging off too. She said that was the only thing that she could see looking this over that even closely possibly.
To me, it looks like it's part of the rock.
Well, and it could be. She just said that was the only thing that drew her eye to say, okay, maybe that's cloth hanging off the other side. But she said
maybe there's a chunk missing of the rock and you're still seeing part of the thigh. But to me, that looks like it's more part of the rock than it is part of her.
I just wanted to point it out because that's
absolutely.
If anybody finds that video, that's the part she pointed out. But there again, it could just be like you said, it could be a part of the rock. But she said that was the only part that looked like it possibly could have been something like that. But
there's her ear.
Yep.
And that enhancement that I had, the other one, it stops about here. So there's that spot that we thought might be an ear hole. Here's her actual ear. And it goes straight out from the eyes, just like ours do. But this isn't so much of an enhancement on the face. It's just an enhancement of this particular still.
Well, look at the patches around her side and on her legs where the hair is,
it's thinner.
Yeah. I mean, and there's and I can't remember if it's in that, I think it was in the other video I watched where the cosplayer was talking about the guy brought up a picture of a chimp, an older chimp that was losing hair because he, was rubbing up against things in the enclosure or whatever. But it was the same thing. He said, if you're walking through the woods constantly and you're brushing up against sticks and limbs and whatever else, that's a very plausible.
Bear with me here, Robbie. But okay, take a look at the pattern of the lesser hair. Okay, what does that look like? Maybe it's just me. But tell me if I'm wrong here. Does that not look like where a child would hang onto her hip? Because my wife used to carry the boys on her hip when they were little all the time.
Yeah, actually,
it looks like where a leg sits, where the part of the other leg sits. That looks like where the hips and everything would be, and then an arm up here.
Almost okay. Scientific purposes, if she's a mother. And that's happening. Where would the kid's head be?
Yeah,
right next to the feeding mechanism.
Yeah,
trying to be correct.
That looks like almost the hair has been worn down because she's been carrying a child. I don't know. Any of y'all out there, especially the women in the chat, y'all have had kids. Tell me if you. And granted, you're not wearing off hair on the side, but tell me if you've had. Like clothing that you've worn out in spots like that, or that's similar to how you would have carried like a toddler. You wouldn't carry an infant that way, but a toddler you might.
Irene says you are correct.
And that's just when I look at that. The more I looked at it, when you said the hair was worn down, I started looking at that and I'm like, what would wear hair down in this pattern? And then I started looking at it, and you can kind of see where a leg has been in a couple of places. Like the kid has shifted positions. Like this might be where his leg was like over her butt cheek or her hip there. And then right there on her hip, if you picked up a good sized toddler and set him on your hip and walked with him, that is exactly where it would be.
And like I said,
Right next
Fast
to the
food.
feeding mechanism.
Right next to the feeding mechanism. Food on the go.
And folks, like I said, I don't claim to be an expert on this. This is not my analysis. This is not my breakdown. This was done by uh, Todd Gatewood. So all credit goes to Todd and to the Patterson and Gimlin for filming the film in the first place. But we've got this enhancement, and we're seeing details we've only seen for the first time. I'm only looking at them for the first time tonight. I just watched the video earlier today when Robby and I were talking about what we're going to talk about tonight. To me, that looks like, because I remember Annette had T-shirts that were pretty much stretched out or worn out from carrying the boys when they were little. Reen says, I got bruised several times from carrying my kids and grandkids on my hip. Is that about, Irene, is that pretty much where you would have carried them?
Yeah, right on that hip bone.
Doyle says, hey, I've carried my kids like that.
Yeah. I've seen many toddlers riding on their mama's hip like that.
Wyatt says, especially if the young was decent sized. Again, you wouldn't carry an infant like that, but a toddler that would have trouble keeping up with you if you're covering territory, because these things are traveling through the mountains, they're following waterways, they're following food, and until the kid gets big enough it can keep up on its own, it's going to have to get carried. So to me, that just it looks to me like my uneducated hillbilly guess. Would you call that? A scientific wild-ass
guess?
If my swag would be that not only was she trying to distract them from where she'd hid the child, but that thinner hair is from that kid.
Miss Lene said she held her boys on the hip while doing most everything.
And to me, that it makes the most sense, because I remember, of course, I don't remember when I was that small, but I know my mother carried me that way. She did housework with me on her hip half the time. Going to Walmart, hell, I used to carry my boys either up against my shoulder or over on my side with my arm under their butt. Carry them around when they were young and got tired of walking at the grocery store or at Walmart. I mean, that's just right where you would put a kid. Roxanne says, I've always wondered if a baby Bigfoot ages like our babies or like other ape babies. Even if it matures faster, it's not going to do it overnight. I mean, it's still going to take months to years before it can forage and handle life on its own. It's not like it's born and the next day it's out running around. We don't see that too often in the animal world. Horses, a colt ain't on the ground long before it's getting wobbly up to its feet. And then after a little bit, it's running around and kind of dancing around a little bit. Well, that's one of the few examples of an animal that's actually up and moving around right off the bat. Marsupials, when they're young get bigger, they hang on to their side. I'm not saying Bigfoot's a marsupial, but I'm saying she's got to carry her young somehow, because if the family unit is moving through the underbrush quickly, that toddler ain't keeping up.
Nope. I think you own something, DA. I think that's.
And to me, that just it only be applying hillbilly logic, but that's what it looks like to me. 443 says Grunt Hilda is trying to riz up Robby and DA with the old city boy. Okay, I'm done now.
That's funny. City boy. I ain't a city boy. I live out in the country.
David By says prey species will be up quicker. Predators don't. He's right. Toshi, if a toddler can't keep up in the wild, it's lunch. So if these are higher primates along the same evolutionary path as us, they have got to have the maternal instinct to take care of their young until they can fend for themselves, or they're going to get ate by something. Dr. 45-120 says, look at the hair pattern at the top of the breast. The hair pattern shows skin stress due to the mass of the breast. I can definitely see how there'd be skin stress, but I mean, this over here on the hip and on her butt cheek and over here on her thigh where that hair is pushed down, to me, that says kid. That, I mean, it almost, if you look at it, you don't even have to squint too hard to see that looks like two legs and the lower part of a body and where an arm would go.
I think he's talking about stretch marks.
Oh, okay.
Pulling down like it normally, if that was a real person if that was a real animal with breasts like that, not a
wrong way. Sorry,
it was not a person in a suit. That's
okay. Look
if I'm reading it right.
Look at this image, okay? Assuming that right over here is where the baby was, okay? Because that was the same spot. Assuming that's where it is. Does that not look like hair clumped up from a hand?
Very well could be, but yeah.
That looks like where something is held onto a handful of hair to hold on.
Prospect, and all these pictures are coming from Todd Gatewood and
and Robert Maxwell from Cabin in the Woods. Yeah. I could be 100% wrong, but if that position, if that child was riding on the hip right here, it's going to have grab a hold of something on the back to hang on.
And that's where it would be holding on to.
Yeah, that is right about where it would be hanging on.
Up underneath the arm and hanging on.
What do you guys think? You agree, disagree, have another opinion? I'm open to anything, but that's what it looks like to me. It looks like right there is where a small hand would have held on to a handful of hair to hang on to as it's riding on the hip going through the brush.
Noble. Braids. He braiding mama's hair while he's the feeding mechanism.
Bleeding in a handle, braiding in a handle. And to me, that I didn't even think about that spot until I noticed that looked like a baby. If that baby's riding right there, that other hand, that left hand, is going to be reaching around on her back and barring a handle back there for that kid to grab a hold of. It's going to grab hair.
Yeah. I mean, it all makes sense.
I agree. I think it makes perfect sense.
It makes more sense to me than that's a person in a suit.
Yeah. And those details are not something, the shape of a child pressed into the fur is not something a cosplayer is going to add in.
No.
Because that's going to be a hell of a lot of work just to get that detail right.
Well, just like we talked about it, are they going to be out there gluing individual hairs on some dude's face? So if they're not going to do that, then they're definitely not going to do that. Putting the child shape on its hip. Oh, you know what we forgot? We forgot to add a child indent on the side of her. Dang it, Roger, you're right. I don't see that happening.
I'm going to bring up this picture again. Bring up a different one. Let me bring this one up. This is the comparison that has Hieronymus in it. But even in this, with this enhancement where this is a slightly different enhancement to try to get a look at the hairs, you can still see where the hair is laid down differently. When to me, it still looks like the shape of a child. So right here, up through here, down to here. What do you guys think? Oops, that's tonight's show. This is where, to me, it looks like there is definitely some, shall we say, matting in the fur that looks like where a hand has been hanging on.
Okay, according to IMDb, Bob Hieronymus is 6'1".
Okay.
So bring those side by sides up again of them two in there. Okay, if he's 6'1", look at the length of his arms. Look at the length that. So we know that Patty was taller than 6'1".
Mm-hmm.
You can just tell by the length.
Considerably by the length of those arms.
Length of the arms and the torso. So I would say 6'5" plus is a very, very, very good estimate. There's no way little 6'1" Bob Hieronymus was in that suit.
Right.
That was a suit.
You know, we're seeing actual rolls in the fabric where this is put together. You can see where the fabric is wrinkling, but you know what you don't see? A spot where a child has been carried.
Well, and I mean, it just, and there's another picture that I've seen with some, and I can't remember the other guy's name. You may know him, DA. The guy that was Hieronymus's, I don't want to call him benefactor, but the guy was helping him say that he did all this stuff.
Yeah.
There's a picture of him with the mask off, and he's got the eye black on.
Mm-hmm.
That ain't eye black.
Talking about.
But that ain't eye black.
I think I've got that image. Give me just a second. Okay. Okay, I've got that image, but the only one I can find quickly is actually part of a meme. So please ignore the meme. Yeah, you can't tell me that suit has eye shine like we were just looking at. Okay, well, let me scroll in. Let's take a good look at this face, okay? And now, granted, this is not the greatest quality of images, but take a look at that face right there. And now let's swap that over to this image. And tell me that was made by the same guy.
Steve Patton said, not only that, the feeding mechanism is not well defined.
Very much so.
Hey, you know, I come up with a good one every now and then.
Robert D's right. The suits aren't even the same colors.
No.
Brian Barber says the meme's spot on. Thanks, Brian.
Hey, sometimes the truth hurts.
Vicky says you'd have to think when we had our toddlers hanging or riding on our hips, the left hand would go up the back under our arms. Exactly, and that's what I'm looking at in that image. It would be right under her arm, right up on the shoulder blade.
Yeah, and honestly, I think Noble had a good point. Maybe that is something that was almost like a handle that was braided in. Maybe that's why it looks like it's that long. Is it?
KC, it was like 30 years after that came out that Hieronymus came forward. It was sometime in the mid or late 90s, I believe.
Yep. So the suit he made was with 90s technology.
Yeah, and he couldn't even come close.
Yeah. Couldn't recreate something that he supposedly did in the 60s with less
money.
Less money.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but just looking at this, you know, there's no scar on the lip on that other one either, or a malformation on the side of the nose. But look at those eyes. This is a living creature. Marcus Antonio says, "How tall do you think it was?" I'm going to guess at least 6'5", maybe over 7 foot. But Hieronymus was 6'1". He's too small to be in that suit. If that's a suit, and it's, I don't, I firmly, I don't believe it's a suit. I believe that is a real animal. Roxanne says, "Da, those eyes just draw you in." Yeah, I totally agree. That is a living being. David By says, "First time I saw the film, I never questioned if she was real." Daryl Stanley says, "Yeah, there's no eye black on that eye anyway." Absolutely correct. There's not an ounce of eye black under that eye. Dr. 45 says, "Is it just me, or am I going to remember his name is Hippopotamus?" KC, yeah, in the 90s, and still a sad comparison. Yeah, he couldn't even come close, even 30 years better technology. Kevin Bode's right. Some things can't be faked. Yeah, Conway, you're right. No, I don't believe that's a suit in any way, shape, or form. It is just too alive. And I've seen some pretty good special effects for modern movies, but most of it anymore is done with CGI. But let's even, compare the Howling, which was 20 years after this film. Even the creature effects for Howling 1982 were fantastic. One of my all-time favorite werewolf movies, even today, and the effects are nothing like this.
Well,
Hip Hop Anonymous.
But movie nerd here. Think about that. Since you brought the Howling up, most of the up close stuff with the werewolves were puppets that were like from. There might have still been an actor inside part of it, but it was not a full wolf unless it was pulled away. But how many of those wolves that were up close with somebody did you see actually moving around and walking and doing stuff like that? Think the scene when they're driving away, and you see the wolves that are still there. That wasn't even real. That was that animation, because they couldn't animate that stuff back then in '82. They couldn't animate something to walk and move around as real as that looked in the 60s. So,
Casey Calloway says, when Hieronymus did his suit, he couldn't see all those details. Yeah, there's absolutely no way he got that level of detail in what was it, filming in 63 or 67?
67, I think.
I was thinking it was 67, but I didn't want to say for sure. Yeah, Hieronymus had no way of knowing those details even existed, and his suit looks nothing like this. I mean, even on that image of him with standing there with the eye black on, the skin that is seeable on the face doesn't even look real. It just looks like plastic. It is a very cheap, poorly produced suit. And if the PG film was a suit, it's the greatest suit ever made, because it looks like a living creature.
Yeah, 67. Yep, Brian.
All of 67.
Yep.
Chris Burkhart, Dog Soldiers was not as smooth as that. Dog Soldiers had great effects, but even they, with what Dog Soldiers was made in, I think late 80s, early 90s.
No, Dog Soldiers was in 2000s.
Was it? Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, even at 2000, you say was the year 2000, even in that technology, Dog Soldiers didn't look as real as this. And Dog Soldiers is a great movie. Don't get me wrong.
Well, I mean, you can tell when they're walking down the hall. You can tell that it's actors walking on stilts, because they're having to do they're having to keep their hands out.
It's not a natural. It's not a natural.
It's not natural. And like I said, that cosplayer pointing that out, that you have to have handlers for stuff like that. I guarantee you, there were people off camera with those 3 werewolves walking, telling that you couldn't hear, giving them left, right, duck, up, down.
Yeah, because like they were saying, cosplayers can't always see from inside that prosthetic.
Yeah, but she said,
"Thank you, Patricia."
Said the way that thing was moving and walking, and never looked down to see where it was at, and as fast as it was moving, which I know we talked about, it was moving slow, but it was moving fast for if it was somebody
moving fast and fluidly.
Yeah. So
it wasn't like some stilt walk or some stumbling along in a costume. It was moving fluidly, very smooth. And if you watch that video, there's not a lot of bounce to its walk either. It walks kind of smoothly across that frame.
And like I said, nobody's reproduced the musculature from that film clip in any of the suits that they've.
Hold on just a second. I have an idea. We'll see if I can actually pull it off. I am going to attempt to do something.
T. Davis, those come from Todd Gatewood and Cabin in the Woods. What's the guy's name? DA.
From Cabin in the Woods, Robert Maxwell.
Robert Maxwell. You know, people coming in late want to know where we're getting those from.
Okay. Guess what we're fixing to watch? Let me get this uploaded. This is 10 seconds stabilized of the Patterson-Gimlin footage. Look how smooth that walk is. Let's watch that one more time. Look how smooth that walk is. That's not a costume.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm a broken record, I know, but it takes more to believe that's faked than it does to just accept that that's a real Sasquatch walking across the screen. And I wonder, and I've always wondered this. I don't know if I've ever said it out loud, but I've always wondered this. If people had treated that video differently, instead of all these people, you know, gaslighting and calling it a hoax and doing everything that they have for all these years, if they'd acted like that was actually real, where would we be right now?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always wondered that. I've always wondered if they'd have treated this like videos that they got of the giant pandas or the mountain gorillas or things like that, and we hadn't had so many stuffed shirts that, you know, had for so many years said that something like this couldn't be possible and would have had to eat crow, as Andy Griffith was apt to say. You know, I've always wondered if we would be a lot, you know, we wouldn't be having these kind of conversations.
Yeah. Tell me again, that's a suit. Brian Barber says, Robby, that's a loaded question. Maybe they would have hunted them to extinction. You've got a good point.
True, but I'm just saying, if I'm talking strictly from a scientific point of view, not because you can say that with any animal. I mean, we've got plenty of animals that idiots have hunted to extinction because people don't know how to do things in moderation. So, I mean, that's a loaded question about anything. I'm just saying, would this be a creature that is just accepted because we know it's real now, or would we still be in the is it a real creature or is it a cryptid thing? That's what I wonder about. Not N4 UPD. If you'll go watch Todd Gatewood's video, he explains and goes through what he's used. I don't. He may have used what you're talking about. I don't. That's above my pay grade. But go watch his video. It's called Todd Gatewood public service announcement about the Patty-Gimlin film or something like that. I think in the DA. It's public service announcement. But if you'll just put in Todd Gatewood and Patterson-Gimlin, just look for the one that's titled public service announcement, and you can watch it. It's a pretty good video. It's about 18 minutes, I think.
Something like that, yeah. Hold on just a second while I'm doing something. I'm hoping it works out the way I'm planning. Because this is just quick and dirty doing this with paint.
Down and dirty.
I'm changing the image for the side-by-side comparison with Hieronymus. I'm changing the image around to try to give us a better view of what it looks like, because I am very much trying to give us a better comparison,
Yeah.
And again, this is just quick and dirty. Give me another 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to close out of this. No, don't save. Okay. I'm going to bring this other one up. Instead of the other one that they had a lot of resolution, I brought up a better version of this and put it, kind of quickly pasted them together. So let's take a look at the Hieronymus next to the better enhancement. Does that look better to y'all? Let me get the logo out of the dang way. So there's your side-by-side comparison of the better enhancement. I think this is the one that has the marks in the fur where I think a baby was at. So now that you can see those clearly side by side, how do you think now? The pose is closer, but the body proportions are all wrong.
Yeah, I mean, anybody can look at that and strike that pose. But like you said, that doesn't give him the same body proportions, because everything is off. I mean, the shape of the head's off because that thing is sitting on top of his head. The size of the shoulders are off because he didn't have shoulders like she does. As Steve Padden pointed out, the food mechanisms are not proportioned correctly or shaped correctly. The arms are too short on him. It's just...
Little Patty wanted me to bring that up again.
There's just everything that you can point out about those two pictures is completely and totally different. There's nothing about them that's comparable other than it's of two living people. One's or two living things. One's a Sasquatch, one's a dumbass in a made up suit.
A bad suit. A cheap suit.
A cheap suit. There you go.
And this does not look like cheap plastic and bad fur. This looks like, well, you can see the intelligence in these eyes. Mm-hmm. There's no eye blacking to make it look like, something other than what it is. I mean, the skin goes all the way up to the eye, and that doesn't happen in most effect suits because they can't. They've got to leave those eyes big enough where they can at least see through them. But this looks like flesh tone. We're seeing individual hairs. We're seeing eyelashes. David By says an intelligent creature and a guy in a bad monkey suit.
Yep, that'll work.
Brian Barber says, what do you think the motive was for them to try and make Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson liars? To discredit the film.
And to make a little
I think
change.
that's the entire motivation, was because I truly believe there's been an active disinformation campaign about cryptids over the last 5, 6, 7 decades. When people started coming forward with more and more sightings, more and more of this discrediting would come out. They would try to, if they couldn't get somebody to shut up about their sighting, they'd do their best to discredit them entirely. People have been ruined. People have had their livelihoods ruined because they came after them for coming forward with their story. And I think this was an attempt to get some, I'm sorry, I'm going to call it like I see it. I'm just a hillbilly from Missouri. They get some jackass to come forward and claim he was in the suit, and he couldn't even come close.
But the problem is there's enough people out there that either are too stupid or just don't want to believe, like we've talked about earlier, that see him come forward and say that, and to see him get out there and kind of mimic that walk and say, yep, there it is. That's it. That's all you need to show me. You can't, it doesn't matter that you show them this stuff and show them this cleaned up image and all the work that Gatewood's done and all the work that MK Davis has done. It doesn't matter to them because they'd rather stand on the or climb a telephone pole and tell a lie than stand on the ground and tell the truth. Because you're not going to convince them no matter what.
Yeah, I agree. Dr. 45 says the same thing when something runs counter to popular opinion. Yeah, they will attempt to discredit it.
Yeah. Somebody wanted
David By says Bob Gillen still swears it's a real encounter. And over the last 50 years, his story has not changed.
Even after Patterson died, which if you would think, if he was going to change his story, that would have been when?
After Roger died.
Yeah, that's what's...
if he was going to change it, that would have been when he did it. Chris Patterson, why would they make a fake suit female? It'd be much easier to just make a male suit.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely correct about that.
Yep, you're right, Kay.
Yeah.
But somebody wanted to know if you could play the unstable, the actual, if you had that and you could play it just for comparison's sake.
Play what? The video?
Yeah, the video that with the undoctored.
Oh, you want the side-by-side comparison with this image and...
No, somebody wanted to know if you could play the video of her walking that was not stabilized or anything like that. Just
I don't have the unstabilized version. I can try and find it.
I can't remember. I was trying to ask when I don't remember who asked for it, but somebody said for comparison's sake, could you play that one?
I will see if I can find an unstabilized version. Okay. This is off. No, that's not going to work because it's more than just that. Yeah, in fact, I don't even think I can find an unstabilized version that is just the video. I'm finding lots of YouTube videos where they talk about it, but I'm not finding that's just the video. The only one I found was that stabilized one. Yeah, sorry, I'm not finding any good ones. Hold on, this one might be okay. No, this one's stabilized too. Sorry. Yeah, I'm not finding any of the any unstabilized, but I can play that stabilized one again. I'll do that. I'm sorry, folks. That's about the best I can do on short notice. I thought you wanted a side-by-side comparison with this picture that's on screen now with the one we're used to seeing. I could probably do that.
Well, you could do that too. I mean,
yeah, give me just a minute. Let me snag a copy of that. And now I got to play fetch with paint. Okay, this is going to take me a minute. Robby, talk about something. Buy me some time here.
So, what do y'all think about? I know we kind of have talked about it, but what are some of y'all's thoughts on this? No, not on DA flexing his MS Paint skills.
Yeah, I really rock at MS Paint. I'm terrible at it. I'm just joking here, folks. I am not good at it. This is not an exact scale. This is as close as I can do it. Let me save it, and then I can bring it up on screen.
And Brian's got a very good point. He said there's no way that Roger or Bob could have foreseen that their film would have been the second most scrutinized film in history. And I'm assuming he means behind the JFK assassination. So,
okay, here we go. I've got it now. Let me bring this up. And here is your side-by-side comparison of the original unadulterated face of Patty with what Todd Gatewood was able to bring out. And the one on the left is like a fifth or sixth generation copy. There's so much detail that comes out. But you can kind of, on this one, you can kind of see the eye. But you really see it on this other one. The detail is just shocking how much detail. Because this looks like just a solid bit of hair over here. When you get over here, you can see individual strands and see it's laying in different directions. And there's bare spots. And
just trying. I don't think the original film was stolen. I think it's so old and the way it was processed. That's why it's taking.
What Todd said was when he started processing the original film, that it was so old and brittle, it was literally falling apart, and he had to be very careful how he scanned those images. And he's made multiple first generation copies and distributed them.
And he's made them in different mediums too.
Different media. So he said, no matter how the technology continues to improve, we should have something to work from. But he's made multiple copies and he's giving them to people that are big names in the community. I think he gave one to Meldrum. I can't remember who the others were, but he handed out like a few of those copies because he wants to make sure this film is preserved for a legacy.
And this is not stuff that DA and I are making up. You can literally go to that video that I've been talking about and watch for yourself, and he'll explain all that stuff.
Now someone said, now bring up the fake head. Okay, I will bring the fake head back up. That's as close to the fake head as I can get. Unless you want me to bring up the side by side, and then I could probably, I'll do that. Let me bring up the other one, and
Antonio,
probably get in closer on that one.
Antonio, the video we're talking about is Todd Gatewood's video. He's the one that's doing all this remastering. If you'll put in Todd Gatewood and look for the video on his Facebook on his YouTube, that says public service announcement. and he's talking about this.
Okay. There's the other head you were talking about. And I can bring that quite a bit closer. I'll try to bring that as much as I can to keep both heads on the screen at the same time. And get this out of the way again. I don't know where to put it so it's not in the way. Yeah, I'll put it right there in the middle for now. That's about as close as I can get with that program and keep them on the same side. But there. Let's just come straight in on him as far as I can. Okay. Oops. That is not what I intended to do. I was going to get the logo out of the way again. Okay, I can get close. That's as close as I can get right there. Now I will do something. It's about as close as I can get to a side-by-side comparison without having to go back into paint.
Oh yeah, I can see how he did it. I mean, it's just right there.
Oh yeah, it's the same image.
Yeah, it's identical. I mean, what were we thinking?
How could we ever doubt him?
Yeah,
What do you guys think?
I think old hippopotamus did it.
Well, Patty says the ears are too low on the fake one. Miss LeMay says, why does Big Red have a blue nose and hands? Yeah.
That would be little.
Greg
Red.
House says, I always like how Thinker Thunker breaks it down with body measurements, arms, legs, torso, impossible human ratios. Yeah. So, again, I can't see how anybody can really believe that's a suit. Irene says she has an abscess on her jaw. I think that's what it does look like. Maybe a bad tooth.
I think that's what
up again.
Jesus was talking about that time, like right in this area right here.
Like, let me bring the other image up because I can't manipulate this one because it's actually uploaded to the show. We bring this one up and we can move the image around a little bit. That's why I generally bring pictures up by sharing the screen instead of just uploading them to the show, because I can do this when I share them to the screen. I can't do it when I upload it. Yeah, I can see how that looks like she might have an abscess, like a bad tooth or something.
Yep.
And that does happen to animals in the wild.
Yeah, Boondock. He pointed that out to me. I mean, he said he thinks that might have been something that, like a identification number or something like that. I can't remember exactly where it was at. It's like maybe around her. Where was that at on? You remember him talking about that?
I don't remember him saying anything like
that. Maybe he was telling me about that at the conference then.
Maybe.
But I remember him talking about that because he was talking about, being a tattoo artist.
Well, I don't see anything that looks like a tattoo on this image.
You see what Greg said?
Greg, I am down like 4 flat tires. I just got to be able to afford to do it. Irene says either a bad tooth or a broken jaw. That might explain the scar around her mouth.
Yep.
Maybe she got into it with a bear. Dr. 45 says he thinks it's just an artifact of the enhancement. And that could be as well.
And Boondock says it was on the right arm. I couldn't remember where he said, but I do remember him pointing it out, or what he thought it was, or thought was a tattoo. He said it could have been something as like marking, like they used in dogs' ears and things like that.
See if I can find what you're talking about. I'll go to the. I don't see anything on this that looks like it could be any kind of tattoo. Maybe he's talking about something up here. I don't know.
He showed it to me. He had it on his phone, and I can't remember. Boondock said it was on the right arm, but I don't remember exactly where. I do remember him
get
talking.
Jesus back on the show, and he can show us.
I need to call him again. I was supposed to call him a week or two ago, and I forgot.
And I still think that the worn patterns on her hair looks to me like the shape of a child. Mrs. Moon says, so do you all think they shot all of them after getting the film? I don't think so. I just don't. I know there's a lot of people there's some folks that are kind of feuding over that. I'm on the side of I don't think that happened, because I think Gimlin would have broke down and said something. To me, there's really nothing supporting that other than a few anecdotal comments, which, we find nothing to back that up in the film. We find nothing to back that up from either Patterson or Gimlin's statements. They're the only ones we know for certain were there. So I'm gonna take my stand and say I don't think that there was a Bigfoot massacre there. Now, I could be wrong. I do not make any claims of being any kind of expert on this field. Me and Robby, we've said that many times. We're not experts. We don't claim to be. We're just a couple of hillbillies that give our opinions on things. And in my opinion, the evidence just doesn't support it.
DAT just wants to know which book he should start with.
If you want to start with the cryptid stuff, start with Apex Predator Wolf Moon, and then go to Lakeview Man.
It's got to be updated, but there's actually a timeline on the.
Yeah, I've got to update that timeline, and I'm going to move Dark Frontiers down, because even though the books themselves are taking place in 1865, I want to put them in the chronological order of when Clark and everyone found the journals. I think it makes more sense for them to be in that order.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you start with, I mean, that's the preface or the prologue is Clark and them finding it. So, or the first one being given to Clark. So, I mean, that makes sense.
Michelle Bass says, zoom into the right eye. It looks like a reflection of a balding man with glasses. Yeah, I can kind of see that, but I think that's just an artifact in the hair. I saw that when I first started looking at it too, but I think we're seeing at this point with this much zoomed in, I think it's just pareidolia. But first time I looked at it, I was like, okay, that's bizarre.
Yeah, because I can look at that and I can see a bald-headed guy, and I can see what's those little masks the little white and black masks that you always see for the theater.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like
Roxanne. Yeah, I have seen that video of a woman talking about it, but there's no evidence she was ever even there. So she can tell her story all she want. I believe it about as much as the guy that told me the story that he raised a dog man from a puppy and went hunting with it.
And like I said, if you believe that that's what happened, that's fine. We're just saying that's not what we believe. And
right. Yeah, that's exactly. Everybody's free to believe what they want to believe. To me, it just doesn't make sense. Daniel Boyd's got a good point. Hey, Daniel. He says most people will not believe in anything that would have others make fun of them or to make them see that they're not at the top of the food chain.
Or whatever, they're going to believe whatever's popular.
Dr. 45 says, DA, getting off subject, how do your different series fit together? The series are all interconnected. You'll see overlap of characters from one series and another. And sometimes details about those characters are revealed in series they're not even part of. Kind of like the origin of Gideon's revealed in an Apex Predator book.
Mm-hmm. And I'll be the first one to say that, when I first started, I didn't read in order. And I would call him and say, what about, and he was like, you should have read this one first. You would have understood.
Is it true that government uses werewolves to hunt dogmen? I don't know. I can't say for sure that that's true, but I believe dogmen have existed far longer than our governments had the ability to manipulate creatures. In fact, I believe they've existed far longer than our government. The earliest known cases of dogman type sightings were referred to as cynocephali, and they dated back to the Greeks and the Romans and even Alexander the Great. I don't believe the government created any of these things, but I wouldn't put our past our government to try to weaponize anything. I can't really say for sure if I know if I've got any evidence whatsoever saying that the government is using werewolves to hunt dogmen or vice versa. I've got nothing that can substantiate that, but let's just say it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, because the term dogman wasn't coined until the 80s. We actually thought it was later than that. Thought it was in the 90s, but we found out it was in like 85, 86, somewhere around in there.
Something like that.
But there was a DJ that was talking about the sightings in Michigan and Elkhorn, Wisconsin, and he just kind of like the term Bigfoot. He said, yeah, it's a dog man, and that just kind of stuck. Before that, it was werewolf, wolf man, cynocephalid, dog-headed people. I mean, those stories go back to, like DA said, the beginning of written history.
Brian Barber says, off the suit, what's your thoughts on the tracks? Bob said he thought Patty was 350, but the tracks examined and cast were closer to 700. People get hung up on the suit and forget the tracks. Well, when we had MK on, he said that these things possess a much denser musculature and bone structure than we have, and to take what most people think it weighs just by looking at it and multiply it by a factor of 2. He flat out said that. And I would guess that Patty would probably weigh in closer to 700 to 800 pounds. I think 350 is way too conservative estimate. Hell, yeah. I weigh 270 and I can't make tracks that deep.
Yeah, and that's why when you get like big gorillas that weigh 450, 500 pounds, but have the musculature that makes them 4 times stronger than the average human. They could do that because of the density of their bones and their musculature.
Well, chimpanzees are like between 6 and 10 times stronger than a human, and they're a lot smaller than we are. Imagine a primate that's 2, 3, maybe even 4 times our body mass. Mm-hmm. How strong is that thing going to be?
Yep.
Brian, your question was fine, dude. I totally got it. No worries, dude. Didn't bother me in the slightest. Greg House says, Robby goes in the woods, so armed. Stories about him to little there's stories told about him to little monsters. He's like the human hiding under a monster bed.
You saw that? You the one sent me that TikTok, Greg, or the human. Did you see that, DA?
Yeah, I did. You said that was funny.
I laughed my tail off when he sent me that. That was funny.
Reliable Wolf says, doesn't some of the book series happen in between other titles? Like the first Apex Predator seems like it falls between Bigfoot Wars and I didn't write Bigfoot Wars in Curse of the Wendigo. Actually, Apex Predator happens before Lakeview Man, and Lakeview Man happens before Apex 2. It's just kind of how they work out.
He probably means Odin's Call when he's talking about
Odin's Call.
Wars.
Okay, maybe that's what. There is a book called Bigfoot Wars. Though.
Yeah,
I didn't write it though.
But I mean, if you were going to,
I do know the guy that did.
Yeah, but if you were going to make another title for Odin's Call, Bigfoot Wars would be a pretty good one.
It was a pretty close comparison.
Yeah, because it's pretty much what happened.
Jeff Yarrington said, the tracks I found had to have been made by something close to 1,000 pounds. Yeah, generally you can get a pretty good indication on how much something weighs by its stride length and the depth of the track and the size, obviously. But Robby can tell you more than I can. Like I said, he's the band tracker in the group. But you can learn a lot of something. You can learn, what it's, sometimes you can learn what its diet is just by following the tracks and following its scat. But you can learn a lot from tracks. Tracks tell a story. And here's a good indicator, folks. If you're trailing something and you find a stack of poo, and you want to know what it is, you probably can't do DNA right there in the field. I don't know anybody that can. But if you cut into it with a pocket knife and there's hairs or small bones in it, that's predator scat. If it's just clumpy, it's probably from something that's primarily a herbivore, like rabbit scat looks like it's got a little grass in it and stuff. But if it's got hair and small bones or small teeth in it, big red flag. That's a predator. K. Bauer says Squatch could deadlift an F-350. There are stories of them flipping cars.
Yep.
Miss Lene says the shield wall is one of her favorite scenes in Odin's Call. I was kind of proud of that scene. I enjoyed writing that. Well, Patty says it's snowing there again. Sorry. Dr. 45, he says there's a difference in muscle types. We have fine control while stronger apes do not have that fine of control. What if this thing's a mixture of the two? If it's somewhere between us and a silverback gorilla on the evolutionary scale, what if it's got the strength and the coordination? Because how many stories have you heard of people saying it tried the doorknob? I actually saw one guy said he had opened his car door. He left his car unlocked, and he was looking out his window and saw this thing open his car door and look in the car. So they've got some pretty good dexterity. But he also noticed if you've ever been, like as Robby and I can tell you, and Wyatt, who's in the crowd, can tell you, if you've ever had rocks chucked at you, it's pretty funny that they tend to come up and back down. You don't ever really get them whizzed right at you. There's an arc to them, and that's because of thumb placement. Our thumb is more closer to the fingers, so we can grab something and throw it like a baseball. I believe the Squatch's hand is more like a gorilla's, and the thumb is lower down, so it's got to wrap its fingers around it and chuck it underhand. I don't think it can throw overhand like a baseball. And that's just my opinion. I could be 100% wrong on that, but that to me that makes sense when you look at the physical structure of the hands. Boondock says maybe some are fast twitch muscle and the smaller ones are the slow twitch. Maybe. Just Ryan says, "Yikes, super apes." Brian says, I agree, DA. Something with huge fingers screwed the lid back on my peanut jar without a mark. That takes fine motor control. That's not something that just like grab it. Because if it was just pure strength and it didn't understand how it worked, it would have just twisted the whole top off or broke the jar apart. It figured out how to unscrew a jar. And Brian's got dozens of them back that were just absolutely clean inside.
And he's got some that the dates from not matching on the lids in the bottom of the jar.
Yeah, he wrote one date on the bottom of the jar, and he wrote the date on the bottom of the jar and on the lid, and some of those came back with lid not corresponding to the jar. Don Donaldson says could be shoulders won't let him throw overhand. That's entirely possible. As I know, the really big power lifters, most of them can't throw a football.
Well, just look at that. There's a video, I think it's on TikTok, where the guy has somebody put a post-it note on his back, and he says, talks to the big bodybuilder, says, "I bet I can do something you can't do." And he says, "Yeah, there's nothing you can do that I can't do." And he reaches back and grabs that post-it note off his back, and he says, "Turn around." He puts it on his back, and that big bodybuilder's
like,
he can't do it. He's just
I saw that video.
Yeah. So
when you get that much thick muscle, you lose a lot of dexterity.
And like I said earlier, Dr. Krantz was talking about that, the way their shoulders sit up higher because their neck's not up high like ours are. They're kind of sat down like that. So
that's why a lot of people, when they describe them, they describe them as having no neck, because those traps come up much closer to the head than ours do.
Robin says Bigfoot would excel at fast pitch softball.
Yeah, good luck hitting a 180 mile an hour fastball. You swing and connect, and your bat explodes.
Yeah.
Brian Barber says the guy with the sticker on his back is Brian Cage, the pro wrestler, and he regrets that video ever going viral.
Well, too bad it did.
Yeah, unfortunately, for him it did. But it's just a great example. I mean, when you get that much muscle, there's a trade-off. We were not generally, as humans, meant to get that big. You've got to really push it to get that big. You've got to, in some cases, do steroids to do it. But a lot of guys do get that way naturally, but it takes a lot of work. And, look at people that just, well, I'm a bad example because I'm fat now. But when I was a young man, I was hillbilly strong. And that wasn't from lifting weights. That was from hauling hay and cutting wood and working around the farm. I was hillbilly strong, but I still had a bit of a gut. But before I hurt my back, I was strong as they came. And it wasn't much I couldn't grab. Hell, I once saw my dad, and Dad was the ultimate example of hillbilly strong. I saw Dad once grab a 350 long block by himself and put it on a workbench. I was about 14, and I was like, holy crap. That thing had to weigh all of 400 or 500 pounds. It was the full block. It wasn't just stripped down. The heads and everything were still on it. The only thing taken out of it was the oil and
it was dry.
The alternator and the alternator and all that was off the front of it. It was the engine block, and the carburetor was still on it. Heads were still on it. He picked that thing up and set it right on the workbench. Just Ryan says, I forgot the name of the guy from Alaska who spoke about the Alaskan hairy man having the accuracy of an MLB pitcher because the hairy men were throwing rock at his outboard motor on his boat. Well, I'm not saying they couldn't be accurate, but every time I've ever had a rock pitched in my direction, it's had an arc to it. I've never had one come zipping straight in at me. That's not saying they can't. I mean, you see sidearm pitchers. I've skipped plenty of rocks on water. So if they could figure out how to sidearm stuff, you probably get stuff zipped at you pretty good. But in my experience, the only times I've ever had rocks thrown at me, they were coming up and then back. They were arcing my direction. Sorry, got a little bit of the yawns.
Well, we're pushing on up towards the 2 hour mark, so it's.
Brian says, I've worked on many a 350 motors, never without a hoist. Yeah, my dad was a beast. That guy was stronger at 70 years old than I was at 25. And I was a pretty stout boy. Boondock says Lou Ferrigno was so muscular he couldn't comb his own hair.
I believe that Lou was a big dude.
He was a very big dude. Just Ryan says Fred Roll. Was it Fred that was talking about them throwing rocks at his outboard? We need to get Fred back on the show. I've kind of let him be for a while because I know he was having some health issues with his dad. I want to reach back out to him, see if we can get him on the show here soon. I didn't want to rush him. Irene says, I absolutely love the show tonight, but I have to go. I have to milk a few cows tomorrow morning. Have a great night, everyone. Hey, you have a great night. Get some sleep, get plenty of rest, and take care of those cows in the morning. And our hats off, and when we love our farmers out there, because without them, we'd starve. Yeah, we are coming up on the 2-hour mark. Billy Mitchum says, you ain't lived until you've thrown a 75-pound clover bale onto a 4-stack on hay wagons. I was part of a hay crew when I was in high school, from junior high through high school. That's how I made my money. Made money in the summertime bucking hay, and I made money throughout the fall and the winter cutting wood and selling it. I was a hillbilly kid, man. We had our ways, trust me. In fact, I bought my first actual car. My dad gave me my first vehicle, which was a pickup, but I bought my first car bucking hay. It wasn't a pickup. It was a little Mustang. I really missed that car. Boondock says, I have a friend like that DA. I watched him bust open a heavy bag on the 5th punch. Sand started pouring out. Yeah, I've seen a couple guys bust bags. That's impressive. I couldn't do it. Dave Bice says, we used to haul 100-pound alfalfa bales all day. Yeah, I believe that was what we did too, is the 100-pound. Because it was alfalfa we cut. The big square ones. Yeah, we would roll them up on our chest and throw them up on the truck and just follow along with the truck, throwing them up on the trailer. And then the guy on the trailer would stack them. We walked along. And then, I got pretty good at it. And then they put me on the truck. And then I was the one stacking them. But it was hard work, but it was decent money for a kid with no other real skills. K Power says, if a Squatch could throw overhand, the rock would come at you at about a quarter of the speed of a 45. Yeah, I don't think I want a big rock whizzing at me at about 250 to 300 feet per second. That's going to leave a mark.
Yeah, on the rock.
Yeah,
a
bloody
red mark
on the rock.
A red mark. You not so much.
Yeah, it's going to leave a lasting impression. Trust me. Broken bone, skull, whatever it hits. That ain't stopping for windows or doors either.
Ooh.
Mark Napier says, first time I hauled hay, I was 10 years old. First time I did it, I was younger than that, but I didn't get to actually help with the hay. I drove the tractor. Just all I had to do was sit up there and keep it going straight. And then when I got bigger, then Dad drove the tractor and I had to work my ass off. But hey, made you hillbilly strong. I'll tell you that, though. Well, folks, we are coming up at the top of the second hour. We're going to start winding things down. I hope you guys have found tonight as enjoyable as we had, because when I first saw those pictures, those enhancements of the Patterson-Gimlin, especially that face, I was just absolutely blown away. What about you, Robby?
Oh yeah, even seeing it from the original stuff, that blew me away, but nothing compared to that new stuff. I mean, that's just amazing.
Yeah, especially the face. I mean, the other enhancements on the body, and again, I'm still going to say that looks like where she was holding a kid. I mean, even that spot on the back looks like where a kid grabbed a handful of hair and held on and rode on that hip as she was moving through the brush. To me, that just makes the most logical sense. And I'm not going to get into a big argument with the folks that think that there was a Bigfoot massacre there. For me, the evidence just doesn't support it. I don't care who comes forward and says it. The only two people we can confirm who were there are Patterson and Gimlin. Patterson's dead, and Gimlin has never said anything about it. So make of that what you will. To me, it just makes more sense that they got lucky and captured the greatest piece of Bigfoot footage of all time. What about you, Robby? How do you feel about it?
Oh, yeah, that's the gold standard.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's instead of not just standing the test of time, I think it is has withstood all attempts to debunk it. To
Hmm.
me, that's just especially these new enhancements just make it seem well. You look at that face and you're like, that is a living creature.
Yep. I mean, I don't see how people are still arguing with it. But like I said, they're going to argue. There's
Yeah.
there's certain people that just it don't matter what you say. They're not going to. They don't want to see it.
To me, if you don't believe in Bigfoot in this day and age, I think you've just got your head in the sand. When we look at the map of the missing 411 overlapped with the caves. We look at the maps of natural parks versus these caves. We look at how much land is set aside. We determined on that show that night, you all were listening, you all were there. We discovered that there is over 1 billion, and I mean billion with a B, undeveloped acres out there for habitat for these things. And that is in the United States alone. That's not counting Canada. That's not counting Mexico. That is just the United States. So when people say there's no habitat for creatures like this, they are out of their minds. They are
Mhm.
probably people that have grown up in the city and don't think there's anything but urban sprawl out there. But I can take you from right here in Springfield, and Springfield's a pretty good sized town. And Robby can tell you, Robby's been here and he'll be here soon. But Robby can tell you, because he's been here, you can get in a vehicle in my driveway and in 10 minutes you could be in the woods.
Mhm.
It don't take much.
Thick woods, deep woods.
And that's not even counting getting down into the Mark Twain. That's about a 30-minute drive from here. But when you're in the Mark Twain, by golly, you know it. It just feels different in the Mark Twain. It really does. There's a primitive sense to the Mark Twain. And you got to respect it. And again, let's point this out about the two gentlemen who passed away, unfortunately, up in the Cascades. They didn't respect it. I feel bad for them. I feel bad for their families. But if you're going out any place like that, you have got to be prepared for the weather, because weather in the mountains can change at the drop of a hat. You've got to be thoroughly prepared. Um, what is it we always say? If you're going somewhere, make sure somebody knows where you're going, somebody that's not with you, somebody knows where you're going and when exactly you're supposed to be back. Because if you don't check in, there needs to be someone coming to look for you, because I can take you to places that are 15 minutes from Springfield that you lose cell signal. And this is the third largest city in the state of Missouri. There are a lot of these back trails and woods and valleys and canyons. You're not going to get cell signal. So unless you've got a sat phone or an emergency radio, you might get off the beaten path and have no way to contact help. So be careful, be safe whenever you go out to these places like that. Keep safety in mind. Have a plan. Make sure somebody knows that plan. Have a first aid kit. Make sure it's a good first aid kit. Don't trust your life to some $20 kit you get on a back shelf at Walmart, because you're going to bust it open when things get bad and find you got nothing but band-aids and an ace compression bandage. You want a good kit that is there for the emergencies that you might need. And we didn't do an affiliate link tonight, so we might as well make it Dark Angel, since I'm kind of on that kick. Check out darkangelmedical.com, because they've got everything from basic first aid kits all the way up to severe trauma multiple victim kits. Have a good kit. Make sure it's got at least one. And I prefer to carry two, but make sure you've got at least one tourniquet. You really need to have more than one, um, because you never know. The life you save might be your own or somebody you care about. Check out darkangelmedical.com. As Doc says, be the difference. And if you're HSA or FSA, you got HSA or FSA money to spend, you can get your kits. You can get your training with your department's training budget. Um, So, definitely look into that. Go to darkangelmedical.com and use discount code cryptid20. Again, that's cryptid20 for 20% off your entire order. And yes, you can use Sezzle to make payments on these. Kits are a little pricey, but they are worth every nickel, because when the chips are down, you don't want to you want to bet your life on the cheapest kit you could possibly find, because it's going to come up short when you need it the most. Wyatt says, "Yeah, I'll give you. I'll shoot you a text, Wyatt. It's like we were saying the other day. It's not going to be for as much time as we originally planned. So there's a short window. So yeah, I'll get with you and let you know. It's a very small window. So we're going to coordinate some things, and probably a big chunk of it is just going to be us hanging out here at my house. But we'll let you guys know, and we'll see what we can get done. And it's one of those things where we wanted to have several days to do some expeditions, but it just didn't work out like we thought it was going to. So we'll try that. We're going to try again for spring or summer to try to get like a week-long period where we're all here and we can go do some filming out in the deep woods and stuff, and maybe I can drop a little more weight between now and then. But again, check out darkangelmedical.com. Tell Doc we sent you, and be the difference. Don't forget your discount code cryptid20. Is there anything? Oh yeah, the 22-day foundation.
Are you going to do what we talked about? The little.
Oh, I forgot all about it. You want to send me the I think well, hold on, I'd have to do it off my phone. See if I can find where that was. I got to scroll back quite a ways to find that. Was that in email or in text?
Email.
No wonder. I was looking in my text. Because I'm an idiot. Okay. Give me just a second. Robby, tap dancer, do something while I'm looking for this.
Hey, two guys walking. No. So, like DA said, as far as our expedition, we had some things that kind of sidelined. Some Doc had some stuff. I had some stuff. DA had some stuff. So instead of getting all the time we wanted to get, we're only going to get a few days. So, but we're going to try to make the most of it. We are going to do some stuff. I don't know what we're going to have time to do, but we're going to do some stuff. Probably going to be doing some Dark Angel medical stuff. I think filming some more commercials for Doc.
Yeah.
Because we've got to do that.
I've got it whenever you're ready.
No, go ahead. I was just
okay. I'm going to read something to y'all and get you all's opinion on it. If I struggle a little bit, this is completely unedited, so kind of bear with me. I've done nothing to it. We've done nothing to it other than it's just been put down on page. So later on it'll be edited more, but right now this is just the rough draft that is down on the paper. Prologue. Did I dream it all? Was this some fevered hallucination brought on by stress from all that happened in the past few months? If so, he could buy into that a lot more than the truth that was beginning to form in his mind. He looked at his desk in the corner of his office/research facility, which was in truth the corner of his living room, that had been turned into a place where he could sit and research and read and try to find answers to the 500,000 questions he now had, and the fresh 1,000 more a day that seemed to appear in his mind daily. On the desk was his laptop and a myriad of books and published research papers on things like the occult, ancient and local folklore, cryptids, monsters, psychology, anatomy, and anything else he could find that might give him answers he so desperately sought. He didn't know what was real or imagined anymore. The lines of fiction and reality had been forever blurred in his head. 3 months ago, he thought he understood the way of things and the natural order of the world. He considered himself to be an educated man that had the grasp on his own reality. Then, that night had happened, and his world was violently and drastically changed forever. Now, the question was, did it change for good or for evil? Only time will tell. Chapter 1: The Call of the Night Innocent. 2200 hours, Pickens County, South Carolina. Rick Becker was patrolling in Zone 1, which was North Pickens County. This covered from Pickens City all the way up to U.S. Highway 178 north to the North Carolina state line, and the Highway 11 up to the North Carolina line as well. This was a good zone to work in the county, as it was nowhere as busy by call volume as Zone 1, which was the Eastleigh area, and Zone 3. That covered the Clemson area. If you were in Zone 2, you would be running call to call all the way from the edge of Pickens City to Greenville County line, which is about 50 square miles. There were usually 2 deputies assigned to that area and 2 more in Zone 3. Zone 3 covered Clemson, and if you were there, you were almost guaranteed to be backing up Clemson City and the Clemson University's PD in the college town. Rick remembered a time when that area wasn't as busy, but since the Tigers had won a couple of national championships in football, the university as well as the town had exploded in popularity and population. There was a huge influx of students who wanted to attend Clemson, and that meant more business revenue, which also meant more businesses coming in. This brought in a huge number of migrant workers, and between them and the college students who never needed much of a reason to party, Zone 3 was always busy. Rick didn't mind answering calls, but he loved to look for dope, as most of the officers referred to it. Rick's niche in law enforcement was stopping cars and trying to find those transporting illegal narcotics, and he was damn good at it. Rick had attended the South Carolina Highway Patrol's ACE school, which stood for Aggressive Criminal Enforcement. This class showed law enforcement officers the latest tricks the criminals were using to hide drugs in their vehicles. Rick had been decent at finding drugs on suspects before he went to ACE, but after that, he'd become the county's top deputy in narcotics arrests and convictions. Rick knew how dangerous this particular aspect of the job could be, as evidenced by Robby Bishop, who worked for an agency in Georgia and was a legend in the law enforcement community. Bishop was the guy when it came to finding hidden compartments and getting drugs off the streets. Bishop had begun to put out training videos to help other officers to find the same success as he did, and eventually his success ultimately led to his death. Some major players in the cartel were tired of Bishop cutting into their profits, and then when he started helping other officers to do the same, the hit was put out on him, and he was ambushed and killed in the line of duty, stopping a suspected drug runner. It turned out to be a decoy for another vehicle that drove by and shot and killed Deputy Bishop. Rick had watched Bishop's training videos for the ACE school, and he always admired the determination Bishop had shown, even continuing to make videos after the word of the hit on his life had surfaced. Bishop continued to stop cars, seize drugs, and make videos for his brothers and sisters in blue, right up until the end, until his murder. He never stopped, and he never gave it a second thought. Rick felt that he owed it to Bishop and every other officer to keep getting drugs off the street, no matter what. Rick always thought that a car stop gone wrong would be what got him, but he always tried to run the numbers, the what if scenarios, what would I do, in his head. I actually did that all the time too. Mm-hmm. He supposed that he could do, and God would handle the rest. He'd do all he could do, and God would handle the rest. Bravo 32, Pickens, came the voice of dispatch over the car radio of Rick's 2019 Chevy Silverado Z71 patrol vehicle with the silver star of the Pickens County Sheriff's Office on the side. Rick reached for the mic and keyed up. Bravo 32, 178 Main Street in Pickens, go ahead. Rick replied, letting the communications officer know his location. Bravo 32, be en route to 4211 Laurel Valley Boulevard, near the entrance to the horse pasture. We have a 911 open line. The dispatcher advised. Check the CAD for further notes. Rick opened the tab of his MDT and saw that the call had been catted to him. He clicked on the call to see the notes and that dispatch had attached. The 911 open line meant that someone had dialed 911, but there was no communication with the caller, but the line was still open. The dispatcher's note stated that she'd heard a loud noise upon connecting with the call, but nothing further. Bravo 32 is 1017, Rick told dispatch as he turned off Main Street into 178 North and headed toward the call. This was going to be about a 25-minute drive under normal driving conditions, but this wasn't normal. Rick activated his emergency equipment and accelerated the big V8 engine through town. As Rick came to the high school at the edge of town, he saw a Pickens PD car sitting at the edge of Blue Flame Road and 178/Moorfield Memorial Highway. The Charger flashed its blue lights at Rick in acknowledgement because the county and all the surrounding municipal agencies were all on a shared dispatch system and could see what calls each other were going to. Rick changed his siren tone a few times as he passed the city officer in reply. Rick knew all the Pickens PD officers who'd worked this rotation, and that was Corporal Caleb Cassell. Cassell was the city's canine handler, and Rick laughed because he knew Boss, Corporal Cassell's German Shepherd, tended to howl when he heard the sirens. Rick continued on 178 out of the city and mentally mapped out his route to the call in his head. Rick had lived in Pickens County his whole life and had graduated from the high school that he had just roared past. Funny enough, at one point in his career, he had worked for Pickens City and was the school resource officer at Pickens High, and a young Caleb Cassell was a student there. Caleb would always come to Rick's office and ask him endless amounts of questions about police work and how to get started. Rick laughed at the memory of the young kid that had become one of the best officers that Rick had ever worked with in his 20-plus year career. Rick brought his thoughts of the good old days back to the here and now and focused on the call. He was heading to the area around the entrance to the horse pasture, which was part of the Jim Timmerman Natural Resource Area. This was some rough country in that area, some of which was only accessible via horseback. There weren't many houses in that location, and most were old farmhouses. Rick had gone to the horse pasture with his dad when he was a kid. His dad, who could build or make anything, had bought and rebuilt an old Willys Army Jeep, and they had driven out to the Jumping Off Rock, which was a popular spot inside the park. Rick had been awestruck when his dad pointed out the thunderstorm that was forming in the distance. Rick watched as the lightning flashed in sky for miles away where they stood, but yet felt so close. Rick's dad was always taking him places like this on the weekends when he got to spend with him. Rick's mom and dad had divorced when Rick was only 4, and Rick's mom had remarried. His stepdad was a great guy, and was also the reason that Rick was a cop. His stepdad had retired 5 years earlier from the very agency Rick was now working for. He had always considered himself lucky to have 2 dads. While Rick learned all of his mechanical and handyman knowledge from his biological father, his love of law enforcement and the outdoors came from his stepdad. He'd learned how to hunt, track, camp, and fish from his stepdad, who never treated him any different from his younger brother. It had just been how things were, and Rick knew he got the advantage of learning from Daddy, his real dad, and Dad, his stepdad, which is how he always referred to them. Rick was fast approaching his turnoff and began to slow down. He made the turn into Laurel Valley Road and began to look for the residents. As he slowed down, he heard the radio key up. Bravo 32, Bravo 20, came the voice from Sergeant Jason Sutherland. Bravo 32, Rick replied into his mic. Bravo 32, I'm about 20 minutes behind you. Keep me advised. 10-4, Sarge, said Rick as he saw what appeared to be his destination coming up on his right. Rick felt better knowing Sergeant Sutherland was on his way. Jason and Rick had been close friends and partners when they'd worked the city together, and it had been Sutherland who had talked Rick into leaving the city to come to work for county when Rick's stepdad had retired. Jason had been promoted to sergeant. When all this had happened, the former lieutenant of the Bravo team had been promoted to lieutenant over the juvenile investigation unit, and Jason's sergeant was now the lieutenant for Bravo team. Rick and Jason loved working with each other when Jason became sergeant and had a little pull. He made sure that Rick was on Bravo team. Rick saw the blue sign with the reflective white numbers of 4211, marking the residents to come into view with his headlights. As Rick turned into the long dirt driveway, he could barely make out the small farmhouse at the end. He eased up to the house, and his headlights illuminated the front of the home. He gasped out loud as he saw the front door was open. Well, that ain't good, he said to himself as he reached for his mic to advise dispatch of the situation. Pickens Bravo 32, I'm 1023. Be advised, I do have an open door to the residence. Bravo 32, Pickens copies, open door. All responding units switch to TAC Channel 3. Channel 3 marker is up, was the reply from dispatch. Bravo 32, Bravo 20, I'm still 15 to 20 out. Use your discretion on making entry. Rick knew that meant that it was safer to wait on the Sarge to arrive, but someone might be hurt or worse inside the house. Rick made the call almost instantly to make entry. Pickens Bravo 32, be advised, I am making entry. Rick drew his department issued Glock Model 45 chambered in 9mm and his Surefire Stinger flashlight from his duty belt. Rick gripped the Surefire in his left hand and rested his right hand, with which he held the Glock, on top of his left wrist for support. This allowed him a stable platform to fire one-handed if he needed to, while allowing him to be able to use the Surefire's momentary switch located on the flashlight's cap. The momentary switch allowed the light to turn on with pressure to the switch, but would turn back off when the pressure was released. This was good in tactical situations when he didn't want to fully give away your position. Rick crossed the front yard to the covered porch, and then two things became very apparent to him. One, there was dead silence around the area, as if Rick was standing in the vacuum of space itself. It was almost summer, and the woods should have been alive with the sounds of insects and night critters, but there was nothing. The second thing, however, was what worried Rick the most. He had told dispatch that he had an open door, but what he had, in fact, was a front door that looked like kindling instead of an actual door. It almost reminded him of the remains of the balsa wood bridges they had built in school when they'd stack weights to see whose bridge construction was stronger. Inevitably, the load capacity would be reached, and the tiny bridges would often appear to explode from the force and look like someone had dumped a bunch of matchboxes on the gym floor. That was almost what Rick was looking at, what was as what was left of the front door to the small farmhouse. Rick cautiously moved up to the remnants of the firewood that was once a front door that no doubt the owner felt kept him safe inside their home. Rick placed his left shoulder against the wall, careful to stay out of the fatal funnel, which was law enforcement / military speak for describing a danger zone in front of a doorway. Rick could see into the darkened interior of the home a little because of the moonlight filtering in from a window on the far wall. While Rick was on the county SWAT team, they didn't have a lot of call-outs, but what they did have was time to train, and that they did. Almost to the point of times where Rick wondered why he ever volunteered, but deep down, he loved it, and this was an opportunity to put that training to use in the field. Rick was always the number 1 or 2 man in the stack. Number 1 got to choose which direction to go on entry, and number 2 always went the opposite of number 1. Number 3, however, was the rabbit, and the rabbit had to go straight up the middle and trust that 1 and 2 would watch their back if the threat presented itself. Rick could see enough to the right of the door to know he had a clear path down the right wall. He took a deep, steadying breath and flowed in through the door in tight, but not to touch the wall. Rick moved with practiced efficiency and moved to the corner of the room and stopped to scan the room. First with just his eyes, then a momentary flash from his Surefire. He only left the light on for a second, but it was long enough for his mind to freeze a quick snapshot of the room and the contents in his head. Rick had seen an overturned couch and a recliner in the center of the room, and he knew he had a clear path to the door that was directly in front of him on the opposite wall. He began moving again, quickly passing the window, which he knew was another danger zone. As he came to the door, he thought he heard something, but he couldn't tell what it was or where it had come from. The door, which he assumed went into a bedroom, was closed. He slipped the flashlight into a pocket on his body armor and reached out for the doorknob and tried it, but the door was locked. With the door being locked from the inside, the room would have to be cleared, but he would wait for Sergeant Sutherland for that. Rick made the decision to clear the rest of the house, and then circle back to the bedroom. Rick retrieved his flashlight and continued down the wall to the next opening. The next doorway was bigger than he'd reckoned, and that opened into the kitchen and the dining room. As he was processing all this information, he thought he heard something again. This time, it almost sounded like a low growl. He wondered if hang on, I'm losing my spot there. He wondered if whoever lived here, whoever owned the house, had a dog that was about to jump out. He didn't want to have to shoot the family dog, especially for what it was doing, if it was doing what it was supposed to and protecting the owner, but he also didn't want to get bit. He made the swift move around the corner, fully expecting to run into a dog, but what he saw was worse. He was looking at the back door, or at least where the back door was, or should have been. He didn't know which, and it suddenly hit him like a ton of bricks that maybe he should have waited for the Sarge after all. What the fuck is going on here? He whispered to himself, because the back door looked like the front door, only it was on the outside of the house. Someone kicked in the front door and kicked out the back. Rick puzzled to himself. He moved to the back door and he looked out and froze in horror. As he looked down on the small back porch, his eyes and nose came to the same conclusion at the same time. Blood. Oh shit, he thought as he saw the tiny porch was almost completely covered in blood. There was a small patch just outside the door that was clean, and as he stepped back out into the still deathly quiet night, something strange, as if that was even possible for things that get stranger at this point. The porch was small and the house was almost ground level in the back, so the owners opted to just make a walkway out of 12 by 12 concrete pavers right up to the porch, with no steps up to the back. On the two pavers at the base of the porch, Rick was looking at a footprint etched in blood. But that wasn't the strange part. It wasn't a boot print or even a bare human print. The heel of the print was at the back edge of the paver closest to the house, but the end of the track was in the middle of the paver was next to it. That was next to it. What the fuck? He said. Rick said out loud as he did the mental math. This had to be at least a 16-inch track if it was just one. Oh, great, thought Rick. Now I have to charge Bigfoot for Berg 3. The joke made Rick chuckle a little to himself and eased his tension until he looked a little bit further into the backyard. The home sat on what looked to be an acre of cleared land, but the dense wood line butted right up to the next area that had been right up next to the area that had been cleared on the other side of the road where Rick had just driven in. It was thick and thickly wooded as far as he knew. As far as he knew, this was the only house on the road. Rick looked out into the backyard, halfway between the woods and the house, and saw what looked like some trash that had been left in the middle of the yard. If only that had been what it was, because as soon as he played his light on it, he could see that whatever it was the lower half of a human body. Oh, dear God, Rick said aloud. He reached for his shoulder mic and keyed up. Bravo 20, Bravo 32, what's your ETA? I'm 7 minutes out, 3-2. What do you advise? Bravo 20, step it up. I have a Signal 9 confirmed. Unsure of identity. Signal 9 was the code for death, and that would alert dispatch and Sergeant Sutherland to just how bad the situation really was. Rick started to walk toward the body when his gut told him to stop. He was sure this time. He'd heard a growl, and it was close, and it was big. Rick turned on his flashlight and shined it to his left where he thought they'd heard the growl from. As the light from his flashlight illuminated the area off to his right, he caught a brief glimpse of something large and dark that was gone as quick as the beam of light hit it. What the hell was that, and how the hell did it move so fast? Rick wondered to himself. Then a twig snapped in the wood line off to his left in the opposite direction from where he'd been looking. Rick spun to face the noise, was again met by a huge dark blur that seemed to vanish just as the light was about to reveal it. He was starting to get a sickening feeling in his gut that whatever this thing was, it was playing with him, or worse, it was enjoying it. Rick started backing toward the house, but just as he was within 10 feet, he heard something walking on the roof of the house above him. No fucking way this thing got behind me and on the roof. Well, it was the only thought that went through his mind as he turned and started to raise his head to see what had made the sound. Just as he looked up and began to raise his gun and flashlight, he was struck in the chest with so much force, and he hit the ground so hard that he was sure his body had dug into the ground at least a foot. Rick grunted in pain and started to raise his flashlight, but then was met with an immense pain in his left shoulder and trapezius muscle. He cried out in pain, and then as he once again tried to raise the flashlight, he felt the vice-like grip of iron on his left wrist that made him think someone had parked a truck on top of it. The thing's grip was so powerful that he couldn't hold on to his flashlight. Wait a damn minute. This thing has hands and it's grabbing my wrist to restrain me? The thought went through Rick's mind as he fought to regain some composure. The pain in his shoulder was more pain than he had ever felt in his life, but now a new pain registered. He suddenly felt a searing tearing in his left bicep and his left arm as he was slowly being pulled away from his body. All at once, in a moment of mental clarity, a thought struck him. Holy shit, this thing's trying to rip my arm off. Rick went into survival mode and began to revert to his training. He raised his right arm and, to his surprise, found that he was still hanging on to his Glock. He had not dropped it. How he'd not dropped it was a mystery, but one he didn't have time to ponder. He placed the muzzle of the 9mm to the beast's temple and opened fire. He counted 5, maybe 7 shots, but he couldn't be sure before the pressure on his wrist and shoulder released. He opened his eyes, expecting to see the creature dead or dying. Instead, he looked true horror in the face. He was looking into the red glowing eyes of a wolf, but not like any wolf he'd ever seen before. The head was massive. It was at least 12 inches wide and easily 3 feet long from the back of its head to the tip of its snout. Its nose was as black as its fur, and its fangs were brilliantly white, but stained red from blood. His blood, he thought. The canines were at least 8 inches long and dripped with saliva. Rick had to fight down the urge to vomit as the beast's fetid breath washed over him like the smell of an overfilled dumpster on a 110-degree day. Then it occurred to Rick that the thing actually was smiling at him in some sick kind of demented way. He felt that in that moment that he was going to die. This thing was going to kill him and eat him. Rick's thoughts went to his kids, his son Kirk, who was married, and to his daughter Tina, who was planning her wedding. He thought how he'd not get the chance to walk his baby girl down the aisle. And then his thought was more depressing and sorrowful to him than any of the rest of his thoughts that were crowding into his mind and fighting to be in the forefront of his thoughts. His last thoughts, he mused. As Rick began to lose the fight with staying conscious, he heard the wail of the siren. The beast started twitching its massive ears and curled its black lips back in a menacing snarl. But as the sirens grew louder, Rick could see the discomfort and almost pained look on its face. All at once, the beast leapt free of Rick and in an instant disappeared into the surrounding woods behind the house. Rick fought to stay awake, but he felt so weak he just wanted to close his eyes. Then he heard Jason's voice. It sounded muffled and distant. But when Rick focused, Jason was at his side. Jason was talking into his shoulder mic. Pickens Bravo 20. I need 1052. I need a 1052. I have an officer down. Rick looked down and saw Jason tearing his dark IFAC kit from Dark Angel Medical that he carried on his body armor. Jason began to assess Rick's injuries. Stay with me, buddy, Jason said as he began to apply a Izzy bandage to the bite wound on Rick's shoulder. Rick could feel the extreme pressure in his chest and knew that he had broken ribs. Then he coughed and the taste of blood filled his mouth. Punctured lung, too, he thought to himself as Jason continued to render first aid. As he started to slip into unconsciousness, he heard the voice of Dark Angel's Medical's owner, Carrie Pocket Doc Davis, saying the familiar line from his commercials, buy a kit and be the difference. Well, what do you all think of that? You have anybody? Yeah, we still got quite a few people.
Yeah, so 134 at least.
Anybody? Toshi said, holy awesome. David By says, is very good. Judy McKee says, wow, that was great. Pine Nut says, damn, I'm glad I didn't leave earlier. Wyatt says, love it, just need more. Well, there's something interesting about this that you should probably know. I didn't write it. He did.
Yeah.
Robby's trying his hand at writing a story that he's had kicking around in his head for a while, and I think he's off to a hell of a start. Miss Lay says she wants to hear more. Shadow Gypsy says more.
Well,
we're going to keep after Rafi and see if we can get him to finish this, but I think it's off to a heck of a good start.
Yeah, chapter 2 is done already.
So y'all, give Robby lots of encouragement so he finishes this one. And I'm interested to see where this story takes us. Miss Lene
Thank
says,
y'all.
way to go, Robby.
Thank
Mark
you.
Napier says, awesome.
Well, you know, I had a lot of good help, a lot of good examples to learn from over here.
Hey, man, I've said it before. If I can do it, you can do it.
Well, and I told you this. If I'd have started trying to write that story when I wanted to, and still, y'all know me. You know I'm my own worst critic.
Well, every writer is.
But I don't think it would have been anything near that decent if I hadn't been friends with you and reading your stuff, because I hope y'all can tell that I modeled it after his writing.
Well, I appreciate it, man. But every book you've ever read in your life is research for your own writing. I mean, that's just the way it is. Your best writers are readers, and I read constantly. So
Yeah, I do too.
you've got to study how other people do it before you know how you want to. And I'm very, very proud and humbled that you would choose me. Thank you, man.
Yeah, I mean,
Honored.
got
But I'm gonna stay after you. I want you to finish this.
So the tentative title is called Silver Star, and obviously there's going to be some cryptid elements in it, and this guy right here is showing up in the second chapter. There's going to be some cryptid elements in it, but this is a straight up werewolf, in case y'all couldn't figure it out already. But there's going to be some cryptid stuff to it, and the symbol on the side of Pickens County's cars used to be one of those silver stars, so it's kind of a play on Silver Star that is on the patrol vehicles, and silver to kill a werewolf type thing. So thank y'all, appreciate it.
Yeah, dude, I think it's got great potential as a story. I really like how it took off, and yeah, I think it's off to a great start.
Well, like I said, I would have had no idea about pacing or going back and throwing those little details in there, like the stuff about Clemson University, and most all that stuff is 100% accurate. Other than obviously the werewolf attack, but for the most part, everything in there is a real place. Sonya can tell you that that's real place, real county. The guy that was the partner, he's a real. The only person that's made up is the main character. But Sutherland, he's Castle's real. Sutherland's real. But Castle actually works for the sheriff's office now. He used to work for the city. So, but he's a real person, and that's actually his K9. So all that stuff's real.
If we can get Robby to finish this, maybe he'll have us read it on the Redneck Reading Association one of these nights.
Yeah, we can get it polished up where it is edited a little bit better.
Trust me, editing is every bit of the work of writing it. I mean, sometimes editing is worse.
Chapter 2 is on my computer in my office at school. I got to send that today. I'm supposed to send it to him today, but we were out of school today, so he didn't get it today. So sorry. So I'm glad y'all like it.
Vicky says, "Come on, who wouldn't have known it was going to be about werewolves?" That's Robby's favorite. Jeff Yarrington says he'll buy that book. Hell yeah, man. You're already developing a fan club. You haven't even finished the book yet.
Well, like I said, I'm trying. Chapter 1 came real easy. Chapter 2, pretty easy. Chapter 3, I'm kind of like, I know where I want it to go, but I don't know how to get it there yet. So I guess I'll figure that out tomorrow when I start on it.
Yeah, sometimes you just gotta put a character in a situation and let him take off with it.
Yeah. So,
Well, we'll keep y'all posted as he gets more of that done. And Robby sent that to me and Doc, and I read over it, and we got to talking about it the other night. And I'm like, well, we could read it on the show and see what everybody else thinks. And Robby decided that he wanted to take the plunge and let you all hear it and see what you guys thought. And I'm really glad you guys are giving him some good feedback.
yep.
Well, folks, we are coming up on the third hour now. We're at 10:35 my time, and I know it's later Robby's. I do want to remind you all about the 22 a Day Foundation. We lose 22 veterans a day to suicide, and that is 22 too many. You reach out to your friends and family who are first responders or veterans, or even still on duty, on active duty. Let them know you care about them. Let them know you're thinking about them, because you never know when that one "Hey, how are you doing?" text might be the only thing that kept them off the edge that day. And don't let the hard days win, because at least 22 times a day they do. Let's get 22 down to 0. Again, reach out to your friends and family, because those men and women in uniform, we owe them a debt we're never ever really going to be able to repay. So again, reach out, let them know you care. And we're going to wind this down with a toast. And you know what? I'm going to toasting my buddy Robby tonight, because he did such an awesome job.
Did you see what Lieutenant said?
Well, that's kind of tradition. We'll have to make sure that happens, LT.
Yep. And I knew that, so that's why it was funny.
That's a long story, probably one I shouldn't share on the show.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to wind her up with a toast, and the toast is from an old Irish drinking song called "The Parting Glass." And if you guys want to toast along with me, you can raise a glass of whatever you want. Doesn't matter. It's the sentiment that matters. And the toast says, "But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call. Good night, and joy be to you all." Good night, everybody. Slán Jama, and we'll see you on Saturday.
Slán.
Thank you for joining us. Catch us again Wednesdays and Saturdays on DAExMachiNation. A special thanks to all our channel members and Patreon supporters. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe.